either because the decision to turn their back on the fans or a friend simply did not make sense within the story being told. Nothing was really done with the shocking backstabbing in the aftermath, or this evil version of their character simply did not click. It's safe to say each and every one of the WWE icons of the past and present sitting on this list would prefer you to forget about these strange times they listened to the devil on their shoulder. But that's easier said than done, sadly, because I am Gareth, this is What Culture Wrestling, and here are 11 weird heel turns WWE icons would like you to forget. Number 11, Shawn Michaels screws his student Daniel Bryan. Yep, that sounds weird. Not for the first time in his career. All-time WWE legend Shawn Michaels ended up screwing a beloved babyface out of the WWE Championship at Hell in a Cell 2013. Only this time it wasn't a certain hitman having the belt ripped away from him by a heartbreak kid. It was special guest referee Michaels' own former student Daniel Bryan. At this point, the showstopper was very much retired too, so watching him get physical in that Bryan vs Randy Orton encounter and turn heel for the first time since 2005 was unexpected to say the least. Would this all be leading to a gripping dream match pitting teacher against student in between the ropes? Well, not exactly. Instead, the whole thing was swiftly dropped after Bryan got his revenge on the D-Generation X-Man for that sweet chin music to the face one night later on Raw. And why did HBK bother becoming a bad guy for this brief, often forgotten spell? Michaels was just sticking up for his best bud Triple H after he was kneed in the face by D-Bry. Oh, and this was apparently his way of teaching the little puke that you can't trust anyone in this business. Right then, couldn't have just sent him that lesson via email, yeah, Shawn? Watching Michaels back to his a-hole best was a thrill, sure, but his dumb reasons for doing so and the fact he was eventually just back to being a babyface Hall of Famer when he returned to screens like none of this had ever happened turned this all into a weird little bit of business. Number 10, William Regal stabs Jon Moxley in the back. The legendary William Regal did something similar to HBK in 2022, as he brought his time in AEW to a close. Coming into Jon Moxley's fight with MJF at Full Gear, Regal had acted as the Blackpool Combat Club's leader and manager. The British icon had also clashed with the Salt of the Earth on the mic, with Maxwell's bitterness over Regal's email response to him as a young wrestler trying to break into WWE, eventually motivating him to become the despicable megastar he did. But then, rather than help his fellow BCC member walk out of the pay-per-view with the AEW World Championship, Regal suddenly opted to assist Friedman instead, handing him his famous brass knuckles to finish off Mox. Why, oh why, would this respected figure do such a thing? Well, by the time Regal was set to depart the company to return to WWE a few weeks later, the legend had explained his dastardly actions in a pre-recorded interview as being his own final lesson to the BCC. Much like HBK's strange reason for betraying D-Bry in 2014, Regal just wanted to teach the team that didn't need him anymore that they should never trust anyone and always stay one step ahead. As if veterans Moxley, Claudio Castagnoli, and the aforementioned Bryan Danielson weren't already aware of this lesson. He'd also justify helping the villainous Maxwell, who'd later turn on Regal, by stating that it was his way of giving the new champ precisely what he wanted, in the process putting a target on his back in a sort of be careful what you wish for kind of move. Or something. The bizarre turn just overcomplicated everything in the end, and the company swiftly moved on from the weird events afterwards. Number 9, Undisputed Era break off from the Elite. When it comes to the black and gold WWE brand, NXT factions do not come much more iconic than the Undisputed Era. Throughout much of their time on WWE's developmental show, the unit acted as a heel force who used their strength in numbers to get their hands on all sorts of gold. And this was ultimately a tactic they'd use outside of the company too, with the likes of Adam Cole, Kyle O'Reilly, and Bobby Fish joining AEW's villainous Elite squad in 2021. Sadly though, things wouldn't quite work out for this initial all-elite version of the Undisputed team, with injuries and departures eventually ruining any potential Undisputed Era versus the Elite showdown. It's a shame really, as the sight of O'Reilly, Fish, and Cole turning on the Young Bucks on the August 3rd, 2022 edition of Dynamite led to one of the loudest pops of that summer as Hangman Page rushed out to help his old pals. But with Cole and O'Reilly being forced onto the sidelines to deal with injuries shortly after, and Fish departing AEW at the end of the month, the company weren't really able to build on that shocking moment. So it just became little more than a strange piece of trivia that most folks forget even occurred on AEW programming. Now I want to know, what do you think is the biggest missed opportunity in AEW history? Do you think it's not booking the Elite versus the Undisputed Era, or something else? You let me know in the comment section down below. Number 8, Evil Goldberg. Some characters are just impossible to boo. Like me, and WCW learned that the hard way when they attempted to turn the eventual WWE Universal Champion Goldberg heel back in 2000, turning up to cost Kevin Nash the World Heavyweight Championship at the Great American Bash pay-per-view, the man ended up bizarrely aligning himself with Vince Russo and Eric Bischoff in the most late WCW move imaginable. It turned out to be as disastrous as expected. No one wanted to reject the unstoppable force, and his battering of the beloved Jim Duggan and new attitude on the mic just felt wrong, with Goldberg evidently not feeling being a bad guy after years on top as a WCW superhero. Thankfully, the weird experiment didn't last too long, and the former World Heavyweight Champion was switched back over to being a babyface a few months after the initial turn. But that still doesn't change the fact that even this absolute icon couldn't escape the terrible, nonsensical booking seen going down within WCW during its dying days. Number 7, Cody Rhodes' meta heel turn. Cody Rhodes' final few months as part of the AEW machine didn't actually see him performing in the role of the universally adored babyface fans know and love today. Instead, the American Nightmare portrayed a somewhat polarizing figure, one who simply refused to turn to the dark side despite audiences around the country clearly begging for him to embrace the hate. Fans had evidently lost a bit of interest in the heroic version of Rhodes seen clashing with various rivals within the Codyverse, and at times it even felt like Cody himself was teasing a full-blown heel switch down the road. In the end though, Rhodes left the company before ever going full villainous EVP, and he'd later gone to admit that his strange attempts to generate heat by not giving fans the one thing they wanted from him was perhaps a bit too meta. It's hard to argue with that assessment when looking back on the surreal period there when this future top hero in the business was very much booed out of the building when taking on villains like Ethan Page and cutting babyface promos to the Dynamite crowd. What a weird old time. Number 6, Dean Ambrose stabs his Shield brother in the back. A year before the white-hot Jon Moxley would appear on the debut episode of AEW Dynamite in October 2019 as the biggest badass in the business, the one time Dean Ambrose was about to embark on arguably the most disappointing period of his entire career. Oh, how quickly things can change in this wacky business. Shockingly turning on his Shield brother Seth Rollins after winning Tag Gold on the same night their teammate Roman Reigns announced he would be stepping away from the ring due to a very real battle with leukemia, Ambrose had the potential to become the most despised character in the industry. Instead of a genuinely compelling and unnerving version of the Ambrose persona though, WWE just put him in a gas mask and stuck a vaccination needle in his ass, as the villain worried about catching a disease from the filthy crowd watching on. Lame would be an understatement. The program with Rollins underwhelmed, and it wasn't long before a fed-up Ambrose's departure from the company was announced. But rather than keep him in this odd heel role for the remainder of his time there, WWE opted to just turn him face and reunite the star with the Shield on his way out the door. I mean, that was nice at least. Cheers for checking out this list today, folks, and if you're enjoying what you're watching, then hit that subscribe button down below for more What Culture Wrestling stuff in your day. Number 5, Steve Austin makes a deal with the devil. While the legendary Stone Cold Steve Austin's reasons for wanting to go full heel at WrestleMania X7 were understandable, he'd grown tired of being the babyface and felt the need to reinvent himself a bit. The weird run that followed was one that he and WWE would ultimately live to regret. Now sure, the change in character after making a deal with the devil himself, Mr. McMahon, did allow him to eventually flex his comedic muscles a little more. But similarly to the aforementioned Goldberg, people just did not want to hate the Texas Rattlesnake and push back against the unwanted move. It also didn't help that the character itself was a bit all over the place too. The vicious psycho's horrendous attacks on JR and Lita were undermined by the aforementioned moments of comedy alongside Kurt Angle, and Austin would then go on to jump back and forth over the babyface heel divide a few times during the disappointing Invasion storyline. It was just a mess from start to finish. This terrible heel turn marked the beginning of the end of the Attitude Era boom period as well, with business very much suffering following the baffling decision to turn the hottest star in the industry into a corporate stooge. Number 4, Rikishi does it for The Rock. The incredibly entertaining big man known as Rikishi was easily one of the most popular faces in the entire company during WWE's Attitude Era, so naturally Vince McMahon saw that popularity and decided to have the thong-wearing, lovable dancing performer turn heel. That wasn't the only thing strange about the idea of pushing Rikishi into heel territory either. His reasons for becoming a bad guy were also incredibly dumb. You see, Rikishi was ultimately revealed as the person responsible for running over Stone Cold Steve Austin at Survivor Series 1999, with, in kayfabe at least, that move resulting in Austin being out of action for almost a year. And he did it, well, for The Rock. Rikishi felt that WWE would never push a Samoan star like his cousin as the top guy in the company, and that's what drove his decision to take out the Rattlesnake. Despite the fact Rocky had won 5 WWE championships by the time he said he did it. The subsequent run as a villain was a flop too, with Rikishi getting utterly battered by Austin and eventually being revealed as just a pawn in Triple H's overall plan plan, being hired by the game to mow down Stone Cold. Still, we'll at least always have the weird memory of a heel Rikishi being dumped off the top of Hell in a Cell by The Undertaker, so it wasn't all bad. Number 3, Jim Ross turns to the dark side. On a number of occasions during his WWE run, the company did actually try to get the beloved cowboy hat-wearing icon known as Jim Ross over as a figure to be booed. The first weird attempt went down in 1996, with Jim Ross announcing that he'd found a way to bring a recently departed Razor Ramon and Diesel back to the promotion, and expressing his anger over being sacked by Vince McMahon a few years earlier just after his first attack of Bell's palsy. He'd also suggest that he was the person responsible for many of the fans' favourites leaving McMahon's company around that time, but fans just weren't into the bitter JR character, actually cheering him on during his September 23rd worked shoot promo aimed at McMahon, and they weren't exactly fans of the fake Diesel and Razor Ramon storyline either, so the heel character was dropped soon enough. But WWE once again stupidly opted to give a villainous JR another try in 1999, after returning to the company after another bout of Bell's palsy. A once again incredibly resentful Ross this time took his frustrations out on Michael Cole, feeling the young commentator had taken his job. Just look how young he looks there, crazy. The sound of cheers as JR smacked Cole in between the legs was a sign of things to come though, as folks simply would not turn their backs on the voice of wrestling now managing Dr. Death Steve Williams in the weeks that followed. And this peculiar heel character was once again scrapped in no time at all. Good old JR just cannot be a heel, folks. Number 2, Becky Lynch turns on the people backing her. Both of the mighty Becky Lynch's planned WWE main roster heel runs over the years haven't exactly gone to, well, that plan. Following on from finally deciding she'd had enough of being overshadowed by longtime pal Charlotte Flair at SummerSlam 2018, Lynch snapped on the Queen to the sound of roars of approval. And though WWE tried their best to get folks to jeer the Irish star through weird promos which involved her lashing out at those who'd backed her for years, there was no stopping the rise of the man. And it wasn't long before the company were forced to go all in on her as an anti-hero. Fast forward a few years to SummerSlam 2021, and a Lynch who hadn't been seen since she took time away from WWE to have a baby, returned to conquer Bianca Belair in a matter of seconds. Again, WWE insisted on presenting one of their adored top stars as a villain, this time a big-time egotistical one. But the role, while somewhat entertaining at times and often well performed by Lynch, wasn't anywhere near as successful as the prior man run. And Lynch herself later explained how Triple H eventually felt the company was swimming upstream keeping her as a heel. That's why they ultimately brought her back to the light at SummerSlam 2022, with the man finally putting that strange heel spell behind her as she re-established herself as one of the most reliable heroes on the roster. Number 1, Edge is in the Judgment Day. On paper, choosing to create and lead a new heel stable as a way of getting more spotlight on a few underutilized players on the WWE roster seemed like a strong idea from the mind of Adam Edge Copeland. However, for a variety of reasons, the WWE Hall of Famer's purple-tinted evil run just ended up feeling all kinds of weird. Firstly, fans were always going to struggle to fully turn on a bloke who'd put his body on the line for so damn long, have the business he loved taken away from him, and then enjoy one of the most emotional and well-executed comebacks of all time. How can you boo that face? The overall direction Edge took his Judgment Day didn't help matters either, with his painfully tedious mountain of omnipotent speeches and cheap heat attacks on the audience whilst flanked by Damian Priest and Rhea Ripley, all just feeling incredibly forced and bizarre. None of it will be making it onto the Copeland highlight reel, that's for sure. Thankfully, WWE and the Icon both sensed it simply was not working out, and Edge was eventually kicked from the group when Finn Balor joined the team. The faction only went from strength to strength from that point, bringing in a freshly turned heel Dominic Mysterio, and dropping the spooky vibes for consistently entertaining a-hole attitudes. And Purple Edge was never spoken of again, as he eventually chose to become an all-elite rated R superstar in 2023.